welcome back to the channel. My name's Hannah Hall and this is Movement Practice Online, where I share exercises and lifestyle tips to help you live a more active lifestyle. Today we're going to be talking about something that affects us all, and that is posture. Modern lifestyles often require a lot of sitting down, whether that's working at a desk, working from home, watching TV, driving, and just going about our day-to-day lives. We often end up spending a lot of time sitting down. Frequently sitting down for long periods of time can alter our posture. But don't worry, because I'm here today to give you some easy ideas of how you can improve your posture. Good posture isn't just about standing tall and confident. It's actually more about alignment. And I'm going to talk a little bit later on about a common cheat that people often do that gives the appearance that they're standing up tall with good posture, but their body is actually still out of alignment and things are not working optimally. The muscles are not able to load in the right way, and that can lead to further problems such as chronic pain. Often the neck muscles can get overused and overworked, and also it can lead to back pain as well, particularly lower back pain. So we're going to look at that a little bit in more detail and talk about how you can avoid that pitfall. Okay, so let's get started. And we will start by talking about the elephant in the room, which I've already touched on, and that is the fact that in our modern lifestyles we tend to spend a lot of time sitting down. Now, what is actually happening to our bodies when we're spending long periods of time in a seated position? Well, our hip flexors tighten, our glutes and our core muscles weaken, and then we can also end up with our shoulders rounding forwards, which then puts the neck out of alignment, and we tend to end up having this sort of hunched position with the necks coming up and the chin lifted, and you're actually compressing the vertebrae in the cervical spine area. And over time, for some people, this can lead to chronic pain. As I mentioned before, things like lower back pain, neck pain, and for some people that could even result in tension headaches, as well as then having a lack of core stability, which means that people just can't move and function as optimally as they perhaps could if their body was fully aligned. So for example, things like lifting heavy objects and carrying things could become more difficult because you haven't got the core strength there available to be able to support those sorts of movements. It can also lead to restricted movements as well, things like it becoming more difficult to lift your arms up above your head, and perhaps even twisting movements, so not being able to have that freedom of movement in the trunk and in the arms. So that's the bad news, but the good news is that you can do something about it. So stay tuned, because I'm going to be sharing some practical advice and some exercises that can help you a bit later on in the video. But before we get to that, I'm going to do a little bit of myth busting. Now, often when people talk about posture, we think of this idea of having to stand up tall with our shoulders back and our chin up, and that gives the impression to people that we've got good posture, and it also helps us to look more confident. However, a lot of people will do this and still not have good alignment. So what do I mean by that? Well, the really important thing to understand when it comes to alignment and posture is the connection between our rib cage and our pelvis. Now, we've got a series of muscles that connect the rib cage to the pelvis, and these create part of what we call our core. So when we talk about core strength, we've got our core muscles, and some of these connect between the rib cage and the pelvis. So for example, rectus abdominis is one of them, and it comes from the front here all the way down. So what we're aiming for when we talk about good posture is to keep the rib cage in a nice relaxed position and to keep the pelvis neutral. So one of the things that you can do to find a neutral position, thinking about the pelvis first of all, is imagine that your pelvis is like a bucket. And if you tip the pelvis forwards, water's going to spill out of the bucket that way. If we tuck the pelvis under, then water's going to spill out the back. And you want to just kind of feel that neutral position where the pelvis isn't overly tipped that way and it's not tucked under either, but you're finding that nice neutral place. And it's also really important to get our weight back into our heels as we do that. So what we don't want is to have the weight towards our middle of our foot or over the balls of our feet. We want the weight back in the heels, and we want the pelvis nice and neutral. Then we're working our way up the body and we want to think about the rib cage. The rib cage needs to be nice and relaxed. And when we're in that relaxed position, the connection with the muscles between our rib cage and our pelvis, the muscles are able to be in the right place so that they're actually able to engage and work properly. Now, what happens a lot of the time, because we're constantly in a sort of slumped position through sitting in a poor position and for long periods of time, our back can round forwards. And over time, our bodies start to fix in that position, and then it becomes very difficult to stand up straight. And what people do is they lift their rib cage up, bring their shoulders back, and stand up straight like this. Now, what that is doing is actually losing the connection now between the muscles here. So we are actually not in a place where our core is going to be stable. Our core is actually going to be fairly unstable, and it's not going to be able to work in a strong way. So we might give the appearance that we're standing upright, but we're actually cheating in order to get there. And if we come back down, so we've got our neutral pelvis and we've got our relaxed rib cage, you might find that your shoulders are a little bit rounded, and actually don't worry about that. That's fine, that's a good place to start. And then through exercises you can work on shoulder mobility and spinal mobility that's going to help you to then open up this area and straighten up, but still keeping this correct alignment. And once you've got that, then you've got a true posture that is in a neutral alignment, that is loading your body in the right way. So all of the muscles are aligned so that they can work and function optimally and load and support your body in the right way. So what can we do to make changes to our posture so that we can be in alignment and that our muscles can function in the right way? Well, the first place to start would be to do corrective exercises. And then following on from that, we also want to look at lifestyle changes that we can make so that we're not spending so much time in fixed positions which are unhelpful to our bodies. So let's start with the first one, corrective exercises. What parts of the body do we need to be focusing on in order to improve our posture? Well, my first recommendation would actually be to start with shoulder mobility. What you want to be aiming for is to be able to move the arms without lifting up the rib cage. So you can just try this for a second right now. You can lift your arms up and see how far you can go. And if at some point you feel like you are having to lift your rib cage to get your arm right above your head, then you're obviously a little bit restricted in the shoulder mobility. And what you want to do is keep the rib cage relaxed and then see if you can move the arm independently of the rib cage. So it might help to actually place a hand on the rib cage a little bit lower down so that you can feel whether that rib cage starts to lift up. And just practice moving those arms. You can move them in front of you, you can move your arms to the side. And it does actually help to do this lying down on the floor because it helps to anchor your body in the right place and make it a little bit easier to feel whether you're lifting those ribs up or not. So working on shoulder mobility. I would also recommend working on back strengthening, because a lot of the time if we're sitting coming forward here, we're actually going to end up with weak back muscles, and we want to be able to support our posture by coming upright. And it's the muscles in our back that help to bring us into that upright position. And then the third area that's really useful to look at is actually the hips and the legs. When we're sitting down a lot, our hip flexors can get tight, and also our calf muscles can get tight. So stretches that stretch out the front of our thighs and our calves can also help to correct our alignment. And then lastly, I would recommend looking at the neck and thinking about the alignment of the head. Because as I mentioned earlier, with the forward posture, we can then tend to stick out the chin and the neck, and that compresses the vertebrae in the cervical spine and can lead to neck pain. So as well as alongside the back exercises that are going to help us to come up straighter, we can then think about aligning the neck and the head and lengthening at the back here. And then actually I shouldn't forget that the front of our chest is also a really important area to focus on. because again, this can become very short and very tight, and we want to release the muscles here so that we've actually got the length to be able to open up the chest. Because if these muscles are very tight and continuously contracting, it's going to be quite impossible, even with the back strengthening exercises, to get ourselves upright. So we need to release this here to give us the movement that we need. So exercises that stretch out the pectoral muscles are also going to be really useful. So to recap then, we want exercises that stretch our hip flexors and our calves. We want to strengthen our back muscles. We want to stretch our pectoral muscles, open up the chest. And then we want to lengthen the neck and think about the alignment of our head. And if you would like help with doing exercises that will help you to improve your posture, we often focus on posture in my weekly movement classes. So head over to movementpracticeonline.com and there you'll find all the information about the classes that I do each week on Zoom. And lastly, we want to talk about lifestyle changes. Now, one of the easiest ways to improve posture would be to avoid sitting for long periods of time. Now, it's easy, except it does take a little bit of thought to start with because it is a habit change. And habit change does take time, and we can use things like perhaps setting reminders and things on our phones to help us in that stage where we're making that transition into a more active lifestyle. And my recommendation is to set a timer for every 30 to 60 minutes to remind you to get up and move and change position. So if you're sitting, do something standing up. If you're standing, perhaps do something sitting. And don't forget, you can use the floor as well. So our sitting doesn't always have to be on a chair. We can sit in different ways on a chair. We can sit down on the floor. We can lie down. So it's about constantly moving and changing our positions. And that's going to help us to avoid repetitive positions that over time can actually cause our posture to deteriorate. So changing your posture is not an overnight fix. It is going to take time. It is going to take a little bit of work and a little bit of habit change as well. And that's probably the most difficult thing, but it can be done. And you can do it slowly and easily over time. So I hope this video has given you some ideas and helped you know where to start in terms of improving posture. And if you want any further help, come over to the website movementpracticeonline.com. So stay moving, and I'll see you next time.